our lower control arm here, I'm going to go ahead and put this up in the truck. These bushings, yes, they should slide right home. Now you want to be really careful not to let this fall on your head for obvious reasons. So I'm just going to go ahead and start the rear bolt. I'm going to go ahead and start the front, so at least that has it hanging there. Now we're going to align those marks that we made. All right, so I have the knuckle, the lower control arm in. And what we want to do, okay, whew, that's heavy. So I have the lower ball joint bolt started, the upper ball joint bolt started, the axle started here in the middle. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to start stitching these things together. First thing, we're going to tighten up the upper and lower ball joints, torque those to specs, and then we'll move to putting on the brake caliper again. Okay, so we torqued the upper, I torqued the lower. Now we're going to put the strut bolt in, and we're going to start to assemble the caliper, but we're not going to tighten the bushings just yet. Okay, so I've removed the strapping for the caliper, and we're going to very carefully set the caliper back in its place, and we are going to mount this bolt. We have our torque wrench already set, so I am going to go ahead and tighten these down. Now we want to reinstall our wheel speed sensor, which is the 7mm bolt, and I'm also reinstalling the guide for the brake hose, brake pad wear sensor, and the wheel speed sensor. So the 10mm bolt here, the 7mm bolt head down below. So we've tightened those two up. The next thing we want to do is torque down the axle nut. All right, so we've looked up the axle torque for our nut, which according to our service information for an LR4, which this is a 2015, we should be at 230 foot-pounds on this nut. So I have the impact turned down, so we're going to use this to draw it home. And as soon as I feel it start to grab, we're going to get our torque wrench here. Now, an easy way to stop these rotors from spinning, I like to put something in the fin of the rotor when I go to torque it down. That just grabs and holds it. And then we have our nice big click. So that is 230 pound-feet of torque. The axle nut is set. Everything has been tightened and torqued to specification. The axle nut, the brake caliper mounting bracket bolts, the upper and lower ball joint, all of them have been tightened. We have reinstalled our wheel speed sensor. We have reattached the 10mm bolt that supports the brake cable. We have not tightened the lower control arm bushing bolts. Now, what we want to do with this, we do not want to go ahead and tighten it now with the vehicle suspended. Reason for this is these are rubber bushings. So think of it kind of like our shoulder. They have a range of motion. Now, where we want these bushings to be set to tighten down is at normal ride height. So that way when the vehicle is going over its bumps, the suspension's only moving a little bit. It's only stretching the rubber a little bit in each direction. If I went ahead and tightened them now, the vehicle suspension will compress a good 10-12 inches. So what that'll do is constantly have that twisted. So there'll be constant torsion on the lower bushings, and that will cause premature failure. So at this point, we're going to put the wheels back on. I'm going to lower the vehicle, set it on ride height, and then I am going to crawl underneath, and then we will line up our marks and tighten everything down. All right, so we have the vehicle back down on its weight. Now what we've done here is I've actually put the vehicle on our Rhino ramps So I've lowered it down onto the ramps, and that just allows me to actually crawl underneath of it, because otherwise there's no way you're getting a creeper under it. So we have it at ride height. What I'm going to do is crawl underneath of it real quick and take the few measurements, make sure all of my marks that we made at the beginning of the job are lined up, and then I'm going to torque the lower control arms to specs. So here we are under the car, getting the really cool salt spray dripping right in my mouth, which is awesome. But we want to make sure that we align the lower control arm eccentric adjusters to the marks that we made before. So I've set down the suspension, and the front one has moved a little bit. So I am going to tweak this just a tad. All right, there we go. So I'm going to tighten now the front lower control arm bolt. All right, that takes us through lower control arm replacement on our 2015 LR4. Pretty straightforward job. I mean, it's like anything. Take your time, mark your progress, and keep an eye on what you're doing. Make sure you lay out all your bolts in organized fashion, torque your fasteners, think ahead, do a little bit of prep work, and above all things, work safely. This has been Tri-Lakes Performance DIY. We got some really cool stuff coming up next week. Stay tuned. We have a 2018 Mustang that we're going to be upgrading the turbo, doing a tune. That one is going to be fun. You don't want to miss it. Stay tuned to Tri-Lakes DIY. This is going to be a great year.